Welcome to the latest roundup of news and polls from Ipsos MORI. And this month, we've seen concern about COVID-19 fall to the lowest level it's been since the start of the pandemic. Really, I think, reflecting the unlocking of the economy, the reopening of schools, and of course, the success of the vaccine rollout program. At the same time, we've seen a doubling in concern about climate change. And I think that reflects, of course, media coverage of floods, fires, and rising temperatures all over the world. And indeed, 3/4 of Britons, up from around 40% a decade ago, saying 3/4 of Britons saying they themselves have seen evidence of climate change in the here and now in Britain. So one of the highest levels of anxiety spontaneous anxiety about climate change Ipsos MORI has ever measured. And with COP26 and the United Nations meeting in Glasgow this autumn, it'll be really interesting to see if that's sustained. Have we turned a corner in terms of public awareness of climate change and perhaps willingness to do something? We will see. As we go back to school this autumn, most parents remain very concerned about their children catching COVID-19. 3/4 of mothers saying that they're worried, and that's going to be, we'll see how that plays out in terms of actual levels of infection. And although concerns about COVID-19 are high, most people think that actually both the staff and pupils will be taking tests and perhaps it will be okay. And in fact, if anything, we're more pessimistic about the exam systems and indeed academic progress generally. So by a margin of about 2-1, people think that exams will be normal and taking place in real life next summer. We'll see. There's still more people than not think schools may end up being closed in future. But I think most tellingly, only 1/4 of us believe that kids are going to be able to make up the time that they've lost being out of school during 2020 and 2021. So real pessimism there, and the risks, of course, there's a whole cohorts of kids have had their educations permanently affected. So we'll see how that plays out. In politics, Boris Johnson continues to enjoy a large lead, and Keir Starmer continues to have problems. Keir Starmer's ratings continue to decline among the population as a whole. He's only got 1 in 5 people in Britain who say that they're favourable to him. And when you look at how the politicians are doing among supporters of each party, you can see that 6 out of 10 people who vote Conservative are positive about Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. The figure for people who say they're going to vote Labour for Keir Starmer is only 4 out of 10. So he's got real challenges just connecting with his own voters, let alone trying to get some extra voters from other parties. And we'll see what happens as politics perhaps returns to normal this autumn. But it looks like a tough wicket for Mr. Starmer. Elsewhere in the UK, we've also looked for the first time at how Nicola Sturgeon, running an important part of the UK, Scotland, and how she stacks up against these UK politicians. And actually, she's doing about as well as as Keir Starmer, which, given that she's only responsible for part of the UK, you could argue is quite good, given that the SNP is still absolutely ruling the roost in Scotland and is a major block to the Labour Party ever forming a government ever again. But a lot can change quite quickly, but we'll see. But overall, at the moment, this government, despite all its problems, is one of the most popular governments Ipsos MORI has ever measured. Think about that for a while. We've also looked then at the support for rises in national insurance. Government's announced at 1.25% in the national insurance levy, and a new tax coming in a year or so. And overall, we've got 2 out of 3 people who say they support national insurance rises to pay for the NHS and social care. This was done, of course, before the actual rises were announced. Generally, rises in national insurance, because it's hypothecated, are more popular than tax rises. That's what we've consistently found, so we'll see how this rolls out. But it does increase expectations on the government to make sure that all the extra billions that are now going into the system do make a difference to voters on the ground. We'll see what happens. Elsewhere, of course, we've had the withdrawal from Afghanistan, the complete collapse of the existing regime, the Taliban taking over in literally days. And 4 out of 10 people in Britain say that the Prime Minister and the government have done a bad job in terms of handling that situation. And looking at the chaos on the ground, you can sort of see where they're coming from. At the same time, the British are far more critical of Joe Biden, where nearly 6 out of 10 people say he's done a bad job. And of course, it was his decision ultimately that led to what happened. Interestingly, in America, 6 out of 10 people say that he made the right decision, even if they aren't all positive about the way it happened. So, but for most people, Afghanistan, long way away, hasn't really moved the dice or changed anything particularly in politics in Britain. It's a humanitarian crisis, but actually it's going to go away, I suspect. Elsewhere this month, we've looked at women in advertising and how they're portrayed, and indeed how that changes how people feel about advertising, and some really top tips there for people involved in marketing communications. We're also, of course, still subject to the obesity crisis in Britain, with each subsequent generation at the moment fatter and heavier than the previous generation at the same age. And so we've got an event on the 29th of September. We look at weight stigma and how much that actually stops people losing weight or confronting some of their health issues. All that and much more on our website, and I look forward to talking to you very soon. Thank you.